Right, hi, I'm Keith. I'm the director of NZWebfest, and I've been invited to talk to you a little bit and tell you about NZWebfest. Founded the Webfest in 2015, so our sixth edition is coming up this year. We run every November in Auckland, and at present we may be doing at least some of the elements of the Webfest online, and traditionally we do some conference sessions, we do obviously screenings of selected shows, and we have an award ceremony. So obviously, from a kind of social point of view, we'd love to keep the award ceremony as a live event, and fingers crossed, the way things are going in New Zealand at the moment, then that may well be possible. Our first goal has always been to curate and celebrate web series and their creators, and that's something that we try to do across the whole of the program, whether it's by selecting web series and screening them, whether it's getting their creators involved in the conference sessions, or whether it's the celebration of them through awards or the networking opportunities and the good time of the post-award ceremony. That's sort of a hard one for a place like New Zealand because we are small. We have small markets, television markets, online markets. It's, we're a country of 4 million people, and a few on top of that, and that's sort of many parts of the world. That's not even a decent sized city. So, in terms of everything that you get for economies of scale, like purchasing power and reach, New Zealand's pretty well kind of off that radar, really. So, to a certain extent, we are driven by those forces. So there is a limited amount that we actually can do. And then we're also driven by sort of what's possible. And what is possible is things like travel. We can get our web series and our web series creators out to larger markets. It's not cheap, but it's doable. And that's also equally true for myself as like a festival director. I can get out to other markets and other events and make connections, make relationships. So that sort of travel, that distance, New Zealand in particular, but I'd also say this much the same about Australia. We are a long way from anywhere. We're hard to get to. We're expensive to get to. It's not necessarily worth coming from a business point of view because of the size of our market. So most years, and for most of the kind of history of a country like New Zealand, that's been a significant challenge. We have a phrase for it in New Zealand. It's the tyranny of distance, and we're stuck with it. Not really anything we can do about that at all. The flip side to that, of course, is that this year that isolation has proved quite a positive thing for New Zealand, and as the rest of the world has sort of struggled with some of this pandemic, New Zealand has been reasonably unaffected by it, if you like. We've all been affected in terms of our personal lives, being put into lockdown and so on. There are certainly people who have been very sick here. There are people who have died here, but not on anything like the scale that we've seen elsewhere. So our isolation is not always a disadvantage to us. And another way in that the situation this year has created an advantage for us, or at least level the playing field, is that suddenly, as opposed to being many hours on a plane to get here, we're as accessible as everybody else because we're all going online and we're all running our conferences online and our markets online and our festivals online. So with a click of a mouse, you can be with us in Auckland, New Zealand, just as easily as you can be in Berlin or Montreal or San Diego or Los Angeles or Beijing or Singapore. It's, we're all the same in that sense now. Maybe we've got to get up a bit early, maybe we've got to stay up a bit late, but we're all able to participate in one another's events in ways that we weren't previously. We were able to do it previously, we just weren't doing it because it wasn't seen as the way to do business. Yes, absolutely. That was an easy one. I sort of touched on a little bit of that in answering the last question, because it's important in terms of getting acknowledgement around the world. Most of us who run WebFest do so in a voluntary capacity. We don't have the luxury of getting paid. We don't have the luxury of the amount of time that being paid would allow us to immerse ourselves in all things web series. So we're not experts. But we all do know stuff that each other doesn't, and often that's about our own patch, our own market, our own environment, what's peculiar to it, what's good about it, what's difficult about it, and sharing that knowledge, even in pretty simple ways, like recommending a show or swapping a show with another festival, which is something that we do with quite a lot of festivals around the world. That's it helps. It helps those shows. It helps build awareness. It helps build brands, because festival laurels are kudos, and festival laurels that have finalists written on them are more kudos, and winner laurels, you're getting recognition. You can start to leverage that in getting noticed, in getting funding, in getting partners and supporters to come on board with either your next project or in terms of the selling of the one that you're currently touting around. This year, I think the answers are fairly obvious to that one. There's a lot of the landscape is shifting, so trying to keep abreast of that is fairly important. Trying to understand what's going on elsewhere, what might be coming down the track in terms of how people are responding to it and what the likely effects of that are. I think that's information that we should all be sharing with one another. In terms of what could be relevant this year in particular, I think the tech is. I'm not going to say that content isn't important, but I think the tech this year is more important, because I think that there are possibilities with that we're scratching the surface of this year. There's a lot of excitement about going online. There's a lot of excitement about, I can attend this festival that's 20 hours flying time away at the click of a mouse, and that's true. But the experience isn't the same, and we're all learning that, and we're all sort of looking to find the tools that will help us mitigate some of those losses, because inevitably, you look at something and you're comparing it against what you know. So the experience of going to an online festival is certainly not the same as the experience of turning up at a physical venue, queuing, meeting with people, finding yourself next to somebody in the queue for coffee and striking up a conversation. Those are the sort of networking elements are really bloody difficult to nail online. And the tech is just not there to do that yet. I've kind of just delivered an 8-day program of screen industry events here in New Zealand, and I'm now delivering support stuff like live Q&A sessions for a film festival here that's gone online, and the tech we're using is pretty good, even if it wasn't designed specifically for what we're doing with it. But I have to say, some of it will look like amateur hour next year, I suspect. So I think it's important that we stay across that tech We stay across the possibilities that those of us who have got the skills are involved in the development. I see little bits of that happening now. We've certainly been in discussions here with developers about some specific feature sets that we'd like to see developed and added to existing tools. And I see that Minnesota Webfest and Series Land in Bilbao, I think, have just launched DEMA, the digital market, which again is the way of the future. And I mean, if we're honest, these things should not be the way of the future. They should be standard tools for us by now. We work in Webfest. We work with digital content. We should have been developing all of that stuff for the last 5 or 6 years. But sometimes, you need the push. Sometimes you need not the push to do it yourself, but you need the push that brings everybody on the ride with you. And we've not had that yet until this year, and it was not a good situation that's caused that, but it is a situation that we can all take advantage of, and that we should all learn to benefit from, and to share better, to share information better, to share tools better, to share. We can't really share equipment in that way, but but to share our knowledge and to share our content and make it work in in whatever way you need it to work as a festival organizer. There have been platforms, let's say, like Film Freeway, that have been around for a good number of years now. They absolutely were not much use for things like digital content to start with. They were not great for festivals that did not run in physical spaces. There are other platforms like that, and they have been scrambling this year to try and adapt. So I think by next year there will be a lot more capability, and it's important for all of us to keep abreast of that, so that we're able to take advantage of it and create the best possible experiences, both for festival users in the sense of people who submit shows to us, and people who just want to rock up and attend and have a bloody good time, because they may not be able to do that physically. So we need to do it better for them digitally. No, I don't personally. It's people create co-productions. You might meet those people by attending a Webfest, and that might facilitate connections that lead to working together, and that might lead to co-productions. But it's definitely not a goal for NZWebfest. Not in the sense that I think it's a bad idea. I think co-production is a great idea, and as money becomes harder to find, then certainly you look at the credits for any significant piece of film or television work these days, and you get down to the point where you're starting to see the logos of who was involved in it, and that those lists are getting longer and longer and longer, and have been for a number of years. So I'm not opposed to co-production in any sense. I'm just not interested in it as a goal for NZWebfest at the moment. It's making the event sustainable is much more important to me. I mean, if you look at me, do I look like I'll still be breathing in 10 years? Never mind delivering a Webfest. It's much more important to me that to try and put the festival onto a sustainable footing, so that I can ride off into the sunset and know that the festival will continue, and that it will continue to deliver benefit for filmmakers and audiences alike. So yeah, if I lived in London, if I lived in Berlin, if I lived in the States, if I lived anywhere with a significant population base, and other countries that were a walk across a border, then I might answer that question very differently. But specifically for NZWebfest, no, co-productions are not something that are really on our radar. And finally, that's the end of the questions. So I'm going to finish up with a very quick promo for NZWebfest. We are open for submissions. We are definitely running this year, whether we're running online, whether we're running in person, whether we're a hybrid event, remains to be seen. We have preferences. We have plans A, B, and C. So we'll definitely be running, and we are open for submissions until 31st of August. Our next submission deadline is 31st of July. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at that and see whether, you know, submitting to us is the right thing for your webfest. Sorry, is the right thing for your web series. And if you want more information about that, we are nzwebfest.co.nz. So finally, thank you very much to Montreal Digital Webfest for giving me the opportunity to talk with you, and thank you for listening. So all the best from the land of the long white cloud. Cheerio.